Okay, let's get started. Thank you all for coming. I'm delighted that we have over 50 attendees from the building in addition to our panel. The purpose of this session try to answer as many questions as we can. We unfortunately didn't get to answer all the questions at the April 4th meeting, so we have quite a few left over from that meeting and questions that people have submitted through the website, which is restore10rogers.com. So what we're going to do today is go through some of those questions that people have submitted. There have been quite a few. We appreciate them. And then we'll give you an opportunity to enter questions, and we'll try to answer all of them. We're going to limit today's session to an hour and a half. People need to get to dinner. We have another session next Tuesday. Today we have a couple people from Lee Kennedy, the construction management firm, as well as Warren Cochran from CSL, and of course Jason Powell from Barcan. Also on the screen is Christina Mastriano, but I don't think she'll be speaking. She's also from CSL. So next week, as I said, we'll have Matt Spinola from the architecture firm. I know that there's some questions that people would like to ask about the architectural design. But today we want to focus on why the project is so expensive. What was the process that we used to get to this point? In what way were we thorough in evaluating the building and in determining what was necessary to do, and how are the costs determined? So that's what we're going to speak to directly today. Let's see, any of the panelists want to make a comment right now, or shall we launch into the questions? You can unmute yourself and speak. Dan, you want to introduce yourself a bit?
Thank you, Dick. Thanks for having us. I'm Dan Leibitz. I am a Vice President and Project Executive for the River Court project, and I will be handling the entire project from beginning to end and working with the team to successfully complete this project on time and on budget.
Okay, and is Sebastian going to be speaking today? I see you're there. Okay, would you like to introduce yourself briefly, Sebastian? You're muted, yeah.
Hi, my name is Sebastian Barbagallo. I'm a senior pre-construction manager at Lee Kennedy. I've been involved with this project for almost feels like almost a year now. And I was in charge of, putting together the GMP proposal, working with the subcontractors, working with the board and CSL to develop the logistics and budgeting and scheduling of the project.
Thank you. And Warren Cochran from CSL.
I am Warren Cochran, a project executive with CSL. I've been working on and off with River Court for some time now and have been involved directly with this project for more than a year.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to launch into questions, and I may suggest who might answer first, but please, members of the panel, if you have something to say, please speak up. So the first question is, what was the process for developing the project and its budget? And I'll let you start with that, Warren.
So what we did almost a year ago, actually more than a year ago, we took these studies, the SGH studies and CBI/Socotec studies, put them in an RFP and put them out to 6 architectural engineering envelope specialists for a request for proposals. Proposals were submitted. The board interviewed all 6 and ended up selecting BES, who started ostensibly a year. In a couple of weeks, it will be a year. Partway into that process, we knew that we needed to have some budgeting done. So we put together a second RFP for pre-construction services. We reached out to a number of firms. We went out to those who expressed interest. One, once they read the proposal, declined, and the others submitted proposals. Again, we went through a similar process where the board interviewed each entity and ended up selecting Lee Kennedy and Company. From there, we ended up having design meetings. Lee Kennedy provided feedback on constructability, things of that nature, and we got to a point in late September where we went into what we call design development, where Lee Kennedy took the design development documents and started pricing them. At the same time, a firm by the name of Vermeulens was retained as a third-party estimator. The goal of this was to get the two estimates and then reconcile them. It's at least a half a day process where Lee Kennedy, Vermeulens, BES, CSL get in a room and go line by line and challenge the assumptions and try to come to an agreement of what the value of the project might be. Again, this is based on design development, albeit possibly 50% documents. So from that, changes were made in the design and it moved forward, and the board elected to stay with Lee Kennedy. We got the 100% documents latter part of December. Lee Kennedy went in to develop and go out and get bids from the subcontractors. Those subcontractors primarily being roofing, miscellaneous metals, masonry, and the windows. There are some others, electrical and things like that. And then they were de-scoped, a process where Lee Kennedy, CSL, sit down with each of the subcontractors and go through the line items to make sure that they have captured all the scope on the documents. And from that, Lee Kennedy developed their guaranteed maximum price. And so that's where we are today.
Great, thank you. So one of the questions a number of people have asked is, can the project be spread out over a longer period to spread out the costs or somehow reduce the costs? Maybe Dan, you would like to start with that?
Sure. Thank you, Dick. Could the project be spread out? Yes, but in the long run, it will not be more economical to do so. The all-in approach that the board has opted to embark on, it is the most cost-effective and the most efficient way to take on this project. It's a very large project, and it is best to tackle it all in one attempt versus 160 or so different attempts for each one of the individual condominium users. What we've proposed is what we feel is the most efficient way to tackle this from schedule as well as from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, there are also some practical reasons for not doing that. Obviously, we can't separate doing the windows on a face of the building from doing the facade, because we'd have to do the scaffolding twice, which would be very expensive. So it would have to be done in a phased way. And if you spread it out, we'd have construction going on for additional years around the building. It would be inconvenient for everybody for a longer period of time, apart from the additional cost.
It would also be very difficult to order the window. You would not be able, you have to order this many windows, you'd have to order them all at once and then keep them in storage.
Yeah, that's because the windows are custom made, right?
Well, they're going to make them to order, yes.
Okay.
They will not, it's not in their best interest to stage and order over multiple years.
Okay, something a little bit of discussion about is the quality of the existing windows. We've learned that the windows were R-rated windows. They were residential windows that were put in originally, and they were intended for low-rise buildings, homes of 1 or 2 or maybe 3 stories, and were not appropriate for a high-rise building like ours. So this was I'll call it a shortcut that the builder took. What can you gentlemen say about the need to replace the windows at this point? We've had, of course, it was BES that did a lot of the investigation, but I think both Warren and Dan will have some things to say about that.
Well, windows in a number of locations are leaking. The controls have broken. Even the doors are leaking. They're starting to fail, especially on the weather side. I will call that sides facing the Charles. Other sides have on the low rise, and this is where Jason can chime in, also have had some deterioration of their windows as well. So they are at the end of their useful life.
Jason, would you like to comment on that?
Just that, as we've said already, some windows are in better shape than others, but they're all the same vintage. And they're not going to, even the ones that have held up well or well enough, they may actually be deficient in ways that we haven't been able to observe. We did open a wall recently and find evidence of water infiltration on a window that looked relatively intact. So there's hidden conditions that we have to be wary of also, but I think it just, if all the windows are the same age, they're all going to fail within a year or 2 or 3 years anyway. And it's just not cost effective or even practical to come back in a few years and do more windows. And certainly there's the issue of good windows or bad windows being left in a restored facade. And if a mason says, well, you didn't replace the window, so that's why the facade isn't holding up. And then if you do replace the window, but you don't do the facade, then you're, the window guys are saying, well, you didn't fix the facade. That's why my windows aren't. That's why water's getting past the windows. There's this conflict that has to be, and maybe the other guys can elaborate on that more technically.
Where in fact we have at this stage we have defects in both the windows and the facade, and so they're contributing to each other's failures. It's a problem. Dan, I have a question for you. What's the process of replacing a window?
So step one is certainly intense coordination before we mobilize in a unit. We'll coordinate with the River Court community as the unit owner and through CSL. We'll mobilize in the unit. We'll establish a temporary protective barrier in the unit that will separate. That barrier establishes a work zone in which the trades will come in. They will remove all of the existing trim that's around the existing windows and the casings, and work to remove the existing window back to the rough opening. Once that rough opening is opened up and we're open to the weather at that point, the rough opening is evaluated. Are there any anomalies or anything where we require any corrective work? If that's the case, that work is done. The rough opening is then conditioned with a waterproofing membrane that is going around 4 sides. On the sill, there will be a piece of stainless steel flashing that acts as a bridge to get from the interior to the exterior that is not going to be visible on the interior at all. At that point, the window is installed in the rough opening, shimmed, and the sealant and spray foam insulation are sprayed around the perimeter, and the building the opening at that point is weather tight. From there, we will continue with the wood trim installation and basically get all of that put back together. We'll do all of the windows and doors in a particular unit, get it all cleaned up, and pull out of the unit. And essentially, that's the interior work. On the exterior, as the windows are being completed, we will install the sealant that goes between the window and the brick facade.
Okay, well, thank you. We've been saying, was there something else? I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, so we've been saying that the new windows will last much longer than our current ones. Our current ones really started failing a decade ago. The condition studies that we have from 2014 and also from 2020 have talked about the windows being in poor condition all along. So at least as long ago as 2014, we knew that we had a problem. What's the evidence that the new windows and facade materials will last longer than the period of the experience we've had with these windows. Anybody who wants to speak?
Sure, I can start on that. First off, the windows that are being proposed as replacements are specifically designed for this type of environment and for the high-rise capability. So a little bit sturdier window than what was put in originally back in 1989. A much higher quality product. The life cycle, you should see 20 to 30 years out of it. That's a rule of thumb. That's not going to be hard and fast. As Warren said, some of the exposures of the building may impact that. But the technology overall in window manufacturing has improved over 30 years. We're dealing with units that are much more energy efficient. There's high performance coatings and other things that are going to make the units, a little bit better for energy efficiency. The comfort and the quality of them, the sound, the noise reduction, the aesthetics, even the mechanisms, everything is going to work better than would have 30 years ago. So the very nice product and a very good window selection has been made.
Any other comments on that? Okay, good. People have asked about the what proportion of the window work is labor versus materials. Can you speak to that, Warren or Dan?
I'll let Dan start to it. I've got a couple of things to add to it.
Sure, Dick, there's no real, that varies quite a bit, that proportion. There's nothing real hard and fast because there's many different configurations throughout the units. So it's hard to say that it is a very specific proportion of labor to materials. And it's difficult to really put a sort of a rule of thumb, if you will, on that.
So
it's predominantly labor, is it not?
The windows and the materials are, there's a significant proportion there, but again, it does vary because you have, all the different configurations of the units, but labor is a significant component of it.
So some of the things that need to be remembered, Dan and his people and their subcontractors are not going to be able to keep pace with the window manufacturers when they're delivering. So part of the price has the windows being stored off-site. So there's labor to bring the windows to the site for either every day or every week of work, then dispose of the old windows. And some of the windows can't come up in the elevators and they have to go up on the staging. And a number of the windows are actually in the openings. They may look like one window, but they're actually two windows mulled together or joined together. And so all of that is adding to our labor cost.
Since you mentioned it, I also wanted to comment that the count of windows is not based on the number of panes or mechanisms or frames even. It's the number of openings in the building as viewed from the outside. And this is why in the listings you have probably a smaller number of windows than you normally think you have with relatively high prices for some of them. It's because they're a complicated piece and has several components. Okay, let's focus on the facade instead of the windows for a moment. What maintenance problems have we had due to the age of the facade components, and what do we need to do to the facade apart from the windows?
I'll start. We have had a number of roof leaks, and it's not just roof leaks, but leaks at the flashing, the brick at the mansard roofs areas, which we have been working on and trying to fix. There are areas of cracked brick over time that the brick has to be replaced. And the precast lintels and things are starting to chip and wear. Dan, I'll let you get into the detail. You or Sebastian get into the details of that.
You want to speak to that, Sebastian? You're muted there. You're muted.
Sorry, which aspect do you want me to hit for that?
Anything that I missed? You talked about
Yeah,
cleaning.
what's wrong, what's
brick.
wrong with the facade apart from the windows? We've had some pieces fall off. We've had what?
Yeah, I mean, the facade itself, it needs a refurbishment of all there's a lifespan of control joints um, and 30 plus years is meeting that control joint lifespan. It needs to be replaced for all the masonry joints. There's certainly the precast, which we touched upon, our ornamental pieces that are essentially concrete, and they need to be treated and repaired and protected against the elements from this. We're in a Boston coastal area, so if they continue to go untreated, they're going to keep on spalling and deteriorating and falling from the building. We touched upon the roof, which again, it's nearing the end of its useful lifespan. It needs to be replaced. So a lot of this is just a preemptive approach we're tackling. We're seeing some, as per the reports, some adverse effects to these things coming to the end of their lifespan, and we're trying to get ahead of the rest of them that before we reach some more catastrophic failures at the facade and roof.
Maybe you'd mentioned we have the two equipment towers on the north and south tower. Those have some special problems, right?
The boiler room tower has some special problems just in the way. It's been up there for 30 years. It's probably one of the most exposed areas of the entire building. And the sealants appear to be giving way, at least some of the drone photographs start to show that. So that is going to require significant work. It is leaking there. We know that. Actually going to be one of the first things we tackle.
Yeah, on the cowl wall system, that's the screening that is in the boiler room. That system has failed and has been letting water into the boiler room onto the floor there. For
These are
some time.
these are the transparent panels on
Exactly. Yes, the transparent panels that create the lighthouse effect for the building. But yeah, that is well beyond its service life, and it is in the process of it's failed.
And the cooling tower, does it have some troubles also?
It has the same issues. It has
Yes.
the cowl wall, but the cooling tower area actually has a roof under it that is showing signs of deterioration, and where some of the flashing where it lifts up and dies into the brick needs to be repaired.
And I'd
So-
like to add just also, in all these instances where we're replacing existing assemblies or like the cowl wall, we're replacing them with an upgraded version of what's already there, with the intent that this is going to last for longer than it has lasted thus far. So where the cowl wall, the lighthouse windows are being replaced with a more durable glass curtain wall system, more robust. We talked about how the windows are being replaced with a more robust unit. And then again, with the masonry and sealants, we're doing repairs and remediation and restoration work in order to prolong the lifespan so that these systems work effectively for the building for much longer than they have been in the past.
So Dick,
Go
you
ahead,
also you mentioned the economy windows that were put in 1989. The cowl wall is another system that was a cost saving measure that was done by the original builders. The original drawings had a curtain wall or a much different, much more robust system, similar to what we're going to put in now. And that's what should have been put in originally, but it's a cost saving measure. The cowl wall was put in and it's failed. And we're seeing the impacts of that. What was a cost saving measure at the beginning.
Yeah, we had mention of spalling. What do you do with concrete pieces that have flaked off or exposed the rebar underneath? How do you fix those?
So what happens there is there's a couple of options. If the piece is deteriorated beyond repair, it will be replaced in kind. But that's the path of last resort. What we're going to do is we will expose the unsound material, remove it, expose all of any reinforcing that is visible. That all gets cleaned and treated. And then the concrete, a specialty concrete, is put back to restore that and basically create the shape again. Anything that is that has been spalled off will either be patched or formed and placed with with repair concrete that will be more durable than what is there now.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question for Jason primarily, and maybe Warren. The question is, what maintenance problems have we had due to the age of the facade components? I know you have a long list, Jason, but maybe categorically, what kinds of things have been failing and causing expense to repair them or to deal with them?
Sure. Hi. Membranes, patio membranes, sealants around windows, flashing failures and or lack of flashing around windows and sliders, roof leaks.
Those things are all causing leaks, right?
Yeah, was that the question?
Yeah,
What
yeah.
sort of-
Well,
yeah.
are there other the primarily leaks that we have that are there other things?
Window operabilities, window and door operability.
Yeah, rot at the window sills, the window frames, the interior window framing. And then, water staining underneath the windows, onto the floors, sliders, water getting in around sliders and under people's hardwood floors or laminate flooring, wind-driven rain scenarios. I also wanted to point out, someone had asked, if I were replacing windows in my house, I would install them from the inside. And I wanted everybody, we sort of touched on it, but I wanted everybody to sort of, maybe Dan and or Warren, to talk about how this is different from a typical residential project in terms of the window criteria, the specifications of the windows, but then also the fact that many of the windows can't be brought up through the building. They have to be installed from the outside. And I think a lot of times, I think people are forgetting how large the windows are and how there is, I'd like sort of to speak a little bit about how someone needs to be on the outside too, while the windows are being installed from the inside, or a combination of the two. We have some windows that are 2 stories high,
Yes.
penthouse windows. Yeah, so.
And we've
Yeah,
also
look-
recently had to replace a small roof at the top of the south tower, right? That was a result of deterioration.
Yeah, an area that was
flashing.
never easily accessible. It was like the architects put a roof, there's 2 of them. They put these roofs in a place where, and then didn't really provide any way of getting out there to do work. So they were just eventually going to fail. It's ridiculous, really.
Okay. So the next question is, what areas of the building are being repaired? We've covered a lot of that, but we haven't talked either particularly about the mansard roof or the roof deck and the pavers that are up there. Somebody like to speak to that?
So I'll start. When we were dealing with that roof replacement, some of the water was entering through the mansard roof and the step flashing in the brick. It's step flashing is copper flashing that steps down. And we ended up having to replace some of the copper on the slope to the mansard roof. What we found was a substrate. The material underneath was not necessarily appropriate for what we would do today. And should have been sealed a whole lot better. That's why that mast climber was up there for so long. So that is probably the biggest problem with the mansard roof, and how it was waterproofed and flashed. The terrace roof itself has drain issues. If you go up there, you'll see moss growing in the actual perforations of the drain that don't allow it to drain as well. The other roofs, the low roofs have already been replaced. It's really this terrace roof that hasn't been touched in many years. So we're looking at jumping into that.
Okay. Are there any other parts of the building we haven't touched on that are getting repaired?
Some of those the other low roof across the other side, from where we had the mast climber up, there's a mirror image of that. So that roof gets taken care of, and the roof under the cooling tower. So.
Okay, great. So another question we've been asked before is the structural integrity of the building at risk? And this is really an architect's question, but the answer we've gotten is no, nothing that we know at the moment suggests that the building's going to fall down, that there's any structural thing. The problems we have are the integrity of the envelope. Is that a fair statement, Warren?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so another question is, the cost of the window replacement, the interior work, the windows themselves, and replacing the windows is what, $10.5 million, something like that. And the question is, why is the common part of the facade repair so much more than the window replacement?
Well, Dan, if you'd let me start, I'll let you jump into some details. So the facade project has all the scaffolding costs associated with it. None of the scaffolding costs are tied to the window replacement. And that is a big dollar. The other thing is we have to use some of the equipment like the mast climber that we had. As some of you probably saw, we had a generator out there. That is not really the most effective way to do it, but the electrical system in the building can't support a mast climber. So we have to make some temporary electrical modifications to allow us to use the mast climbers in those areas where they're most effective. And the shape of the building complicates all of this. It's a beautiful building, don't get me wrong, but it is not a box. And to scaffold it and to work around it is time consuming. And that's some of the big ones. Dan?
No, I think this job is really about access and logistics. Being able to get to the work, given the geometry of the building, has presented a number of challenges that are unfortunately expensive to have to work through. So I think that is one of the more significant cost drivers on the project.
Okay, so the next question is, how are the construction costs determined for the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price? I'd give that to you, Dan.
Actually, what I'd like to do, Dick, if it's okay, turn it over to Sebastian. He was the leader of
Oh,
all
great,
that.
fabulous.
Sure thing. So when we get when we were selected as the construction manager for the process for River Court from the board, we worked with BES to help them further develop their drawings. They developed the scope of work that needed to be done on the project based on the reports and all their investigations. And once we had a set of drawings that we can distribute to subcontractors, we did issue them to masons, to roofers, to window manufacturers, to window installers, all the trades that would be involved in this project, staging, subcontractors. So then we went through a lengthy process of them giving them the drawings and walking them through the scope of work, making sure that they understood it correctly, developing scopes of work for each individual trade, telling the mason exactly what needed to be done and where, and how they would be able to access their work, working with all the different staging companies and developing a plan of how to access each unique elevation of the building, whether that's with the scaffolding or the mast climbers or swing staging, developing a schedule. So once we had all this information of how we wanted to attack the project, we went out to the subcontractors and walked through them. We solicited bids from multiple subcontractors for each trade. So, multiple roofing subcontractors, multiple window installers, multiple window fabricators, multiple painters, every trade. We got multiple bids from, and then we went through the process of getting those proposals, making sure that all the scope was included within those proposals that was appropriate to carry. And then we essentially take the lowest qualified subcontractor in each trade and make sure that they have everything that's required. If there's any ancillary costs that we need to supplement, we do. And then we develop that each line by line trade item for the whole project. So we have a very itemized list of each trade, each subcontractor, each element of the building. And then we further broken it down to the, windows and door replacements to the rest of the facade project. So there's a quite lengthy process, but we had a lot of input from, the subcontractor field. And then also, as what was alluded to earlier on, we then, compared our price that we had developed to a third-party independent estimator who looks at this job almost in a vacuum, completely separate from us. And then they have their own budget. And then we went and compared the two of them. I don't recall at the end of the day, Warren, what the ultimate delta was at the end, but I think it was rather small. What the difference between our estimate, our proposal for the GMP was, and their overall project estimate too. At the end of that 8-hour day of reconciliation, we were very, very close. I would say within a single-digit % somewhere.
Yeah, as I recall, it was somewhere around 7%.
Yeah. So and that was that's always a good exercise to make sure we're vetting everything appropriately. And so that's the process. Then we distributed that to the board and CSL, and we go through that with them.
And I might add that we have on the River Court Restoration site, restore10rogers.com, a number of documents have been put up just in the last few days. And one of them is the design document, which I assure you won't read because it's very long and very detailed, but do take a look. You can see the level of detail that has gone into the specification of the work. This is what BES did, and we'll talk about that next Tuesday more. But part of the reason that this work is expensive is that there's an enormous amount of detail, different situations in the building that have to be addressed, and you can see the extent of that by looking at the design document. Okay, next question is for you, Warren. Is there a risk that our GMP contract with Lee Kennedy will prevent our benefiting from savings in the project? How does a GMP contract work?
So GMP is guaranteed maximum price. So Lee Kennedy has put together pricing that they are going to guarantee the project will not go over this. Now, within their pricing, they have a construction contingency that we worked with them on. Right now, it's sitting at $1.7 million. And as I explained at the owners' meeting, they can use that contingency in $5,000 increments up to $25,000 without having to ask permission, but they have to notify. Once we hit the $25,000 mark, then they need to notify us, provide all the documentation. This is to help them deal with little things that might come up that or they didn't foresee, and they can deal with it. Beyond that, that's where we get involved in the conversation and vet what the change is. Also, you need to understand that this is open book. So every requisition we get, we will get backup material of all the materials, the man hours, everything else. And that's what we have to, as CSL, go through with BES, and then ultimately with the folks at Lee Kennedy. It's a process where they submit what they call a pencil requisition, a draft. We mark it up, we meet with Lee Kennedy, talk to them, adjustments are made, and then they submit a final requisition for that month.
And that's the project management. That's what you guys do. Is
That's what we do. So now the GMP is designed to protect both of the owner and the contractor. But the idea is that if the money is not spent, it's retained by the owner. There are in some GMP contracts, not in this one, a clause called the shared savings clause, where any savings is split on an agreed percentage. That is not in this contract. So any money that Lee Kennedy Company saves in the GMP reverts back to ownership.
Okay, now, do I also understand that if somehow that million and something contingency is spent, obviously for good reasons, Lee Kennedy assumes the risk beyond that. This guaranteed maximum price is the most they'll charge for the scope of work. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, given that as long as we, the board, don't make any changes to the contract.
Right, so
Or
if we
unless
add
something-
additional tasks, then that's additional money, right?
Or if there was something that was totally unforeseen for whatever reason, we've done enough work now, we should know. That would be a discussion point.
Okay, and if we found something that was unforeseen and there was contingency money left in the GMP, that would be used first?
Correct.
Okay. That's great. Okay, now the next question is just how does the assessment work? And I'm going to attack that. The assessment will have two parts. There's a part for the windows and there's a part for the common expense. The part for the windows is tied to your specific unit's windows, and we will be sending you a breakout of that. You've already seen how many windows, the way they count them, that you have, but we're going to send you the estimated repair costs for each of the types of windows that you have. So in any event, the cost is for replacing your windows in your unit. So that's the first piece. The second piece is your share of the common expenses. So that's the rest of the facade, it's the roofing, and there are hard and soft costs. There's the cost of the design work that we've talked about. So all the other pieces, the windows in the common area, any kind of other problems that are not part of an individual unit, that are part of that common cost. And the way that you're assessed for that is based on your beneficial interest, which is a percentage of the total common part of the building that you own, along with your unit. And you should have that number. The letter that we sent with the estimated costs includes that if you don't have that number. Anything you want to add to that, Jason?
No, I think that answers it. I know there's a host of related payment term questions that we're not necessarily, that we're working on, that we don't have complete answers for yet.
Yeah, we hope to have information about the long-term amortized payment plan. We're still talking with the bank about that. Hopefully we'll have that answer in a couple weeks. But as we've already said, just to mention it, you can pay your assessment over 8 quarters, either as quarterly payments or as monthly payments with your regular fees, without any additional charge. If you take a longer period, we're talking about a 20-year period, we're trying to increase it, but 20-year period that's amortized, there would be an interest associated with that, according to the interest that we get from the bank. The other thing is to say that you may be able to do better than the loan that the condo association gets. You may be able to get a bank mortgage, for example, and banks are able to give longer terms than the 20 or so years that we can get from our bank that handles condo loans. Okay. Let's see. What happens in bad weather, Dan? How do you, can you continue to work in the winter? What's going on?
Yeah, we're gonna push to work year round, Dick, but we're going to be very smart about it. In extreme inclement weathers, we will not be working, but every effort is going to make to work the project year round so that we can do this as quickly as possible. There are some temperature limitations that we'll have to be aware of for sealants and some of the masonry materials, but we will be enclosing and providing temporary heat as needed and where it makes sense. some of that is going to be figured out as we move forward. But for the most part, we are planning to work, through the winter.
Okay, great.
Where it makes sense to do so economically and logistically,
Correct.
there are some trade-offs to demobilizing for several months versus working through those months when it's logistically and economically sensible. There's also some benefit to keeping crews on the property, on the site continuously, right? Because they have the most experience and you don't have to worry about getting the same guys back and stuff.
Yeah,
Once-
that's a
once
good
we-
point. That's a good point, Jason. We want to keep once the momentum going and keep the experienced crews. We don't want to have this be a lot of turnover from the trades, especially once the momentum of the project gets moving forward.
Okay, so I've gotten through my list of questions. I'm going to ask to have the question button turned on. And while we're doing that, let me just do just give you people who want to type in some questions a couple moments. Let me give just a quick tour of our website. So if you haven't had a look at it, you can see what's there. So you should be seeing, here's the website. And it's divided into a number of sections. The homepage has sort of what's going on now. There'll be links into the other parts of the site. But the main things that I want to call your attention to are the question and answer page, which is here. And I've marked as new the things that are being added. So we're getting questions in through the website, and we're putting up as many answers as we can. So if something's marked new, you may not have seen it already. There are quite a few questions here. These expand when you click on them, so you can read the question. I encourage you, if you haven't looked at this, to read through these, at least whatever in particular interests you, because it'll clarify, I think, a lot of the things about the project. We have a schedule page. This shows steps in the process that we've been doing for some time, and there's also look here that there's a link to the whole process of getting to the building and which parts of the project. It's a phasing. I'm not saying that right, but it's the phasing of the project, the logistics of the project. There's a link in here for that. And then there are two other pages you might want to take a look at. One is documents. We've added a lot of new documents here. People have asked to see the design drawings, contracts, and so on. We've put those things up here, and we encourage everybody to take a look at it, because we're trying to be completely upfront about the work that we've done, and the details of that work, because a lot of work has gone into this, and we're happy to share the details of that. And if you have questions about that, then you can, we'd encourage you to ask them. Finally, the budget page here has some discussion, but it also has the two documents that we've produced for the overall budget, and for the people that asked, what about the individual trades, the different pieces, the windows and the masonry. That's broken out in the trade costs here. And then finally, there's a contact us page, and this is the best way to ask a question of the board and the contractors. If you ask a question here, we will try to get an answer to you either directly or posted on the website. Okay. So let's see. Have we turned on the questions? Okay. All right. So here's some questions. How much space in my unit around the windows will be needed to be cleared out? Dan, I guess you're the guy or is that a Sebastian question?
Sure. Thanks, Dick. I'll take that. We'd like to see somewhere ideally 6 to 8 feet off the face of the wall, wherever that is practical, to be able to create a sufficient work area for the crews.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to jump in and just say that as part of this process, Lee Kennedy reps will be meeting with each resident owner, in advance, to go through the unit and talk about what it actually means, what these requirements mean in every context or every unit. Correct? Right. So there'll be time, advanced recon, and then discussion, and then so owners can prep and plan and ask specific questions about their particular window treatments or what their furniture is going to do and things like that. Right.
That's absolutely correct, Jason. We will be at certain milestones, whether it's 2 months out, a month out, 2 weeks out. There'll be repeated interactions with the unit owners to say we're coming and this is what the expectations are. Our team has developed a checklist for every unit that will cover all of the important the aspects of the work that we're going to be doing in the unit, from to make sure that we understand and the owner understands what the expectations are to make this go as smoothly as possible.
Okay, the next question is, the current windows and facade were in service for 34 years and now cost $44 million to be, it says replaced, repaired, fixed. Do we expect to have to do similar work in another 30 years? And would we need to put away another chunk of money in reserves? Question says $1.5 million a year from now in order to avoid another assessment then. Jason, you want to talk to that maybe? Or
Yeah, a little bit. So I think the idea is that a lot of these repairs are expected to last longer than that, and I forget what the actual warranty or life of the new windows would be. But someone can jump in and tell me. I forget if they're over 30 years, the life expectancy of the windows. But the idea is that this sort of thing needs to, yes, we would need to avoid another. I mean, we're only in this position because arguably because of deferred maintenance, on various levels. It was always going to be expensive to do this, but the longer it waited, the more expensive it got. And also because certain products were installed or certain construction methods were employed or whatever, deficient materials. And so, things probably failed prematurely too. We do this work properly with proper materials, we should expect a nice long lifespan. And yes, if we start planning for the next 20 years this year, unlike perhaps was done in the first 20 years, we won't be in this position again.
very good. Thank you.
And I don't know what the actual, that's one of the things we're doing is updating our reserve study to this year, now that we have some figures and have accomplished a lot of tasks since 2018, capital repairs. And so we could plot out the next 20 years and figure out how that affects your condo fees.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. The next question is, are there other areas of the building that we expect to be coming to the end of their useful lives soon as well? Now, there are two areas that we're concerned with. They're both plazas, the First Street Plaza and the Evelyn Land Plaza. We've had leaks in both of those places. This is one of the things that we had evaluated, and we're advised that at least for now we can continue to make patchwork repairs, but it is possible that one or another of those areas will become unrepairable. This is a good reason to have money in our reserve account, and we have done historically quite a lot of fairly substantial projects, $1 million projects, out of our normal reserves. The two good examples are the Rogers Street courtyard was redone, Another is the fire alarm system that we're still kind of finishing up. That was an over $1 million project. The roofing on the low-rise, mid-rise buildings, the back buildings, those were done out of capital expense. So there are substantial projects that we plan to handle that way. But again, maybe Warren, you can speak to that because you've been crawling around all that stuff, right?
Well, it's that, yes. So that's going to be one of the next big pushes for CSL when this project starts, is to start to evaluate how do we solve the plaza problems.
We've done some injection into the Evan land
Yes.
areas to try to reduce the infiltration there, the water leakage, and that's helped some, but it hasn't quite solved the problem, as I understand it.
No.
So yes, there's always the possibility that we'd have some other major problem, but our intent in choosing what to put in the project and what not to put in the project was to put forward those things that either were not urgent or that we thought we had a good chance of being able to handle out of our ordinary funds rather than through an assessment. God knows we do not want another assessment. Nobody wants this one, much less another one. So the board has tried very hard to make sure that we've hit the things that are the critical areas to be fixed. Any other comments on that? All right, so let's see. Will an individual unit owner have some flexibility as to when their unit will have the work done in it? I am out of town frequently and would like to be present when the workers are in my unit.
I'll jump with that one. The answer is yes. Ideally, we will be communicating way in advance of when we expect Lee Kennedy, it would be CSL Lee Kennedy, when we expect to be at your unit and communicating with you ahead of time, including looking at your unit, what the layout is, how are we going to approach it. All of that planning is going to be happening way in advance before anybody we get into any units. So yes, you will have an opportunity to tell us when you're available.
Great.
Yeah, and in a macro sense, we already have, I don't know if it's considered a draft, it's subject to change, but we have the phasing plan that is a three-dimensional drawing of the building, several slides essentially that you can click on.
It's on the website.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, we'll get it, yeah.
And you can get a sense of when your area of the building is anticipated to be worked on. And then, from there, as others have said, in advance of doing the work in that area, you'll be contacted. And so hopefully maybe your travel you'll be able to accommodate, plan your travel around the work.
Okay, the next question may be for you, Jason. It says, can you explain if the building insurance that covers the envelope and common areas of the building why it isn't covering the expense?
Sure. I think this is I've gotten this question in my years of condo management, repeatedly. Insurance doesn't cover maintenance and repair, components, building components and systems aging out, things that need to be maintained by the condo in order to function. Insurance covers when there's an accident. So if there was a hurricane or something and a bunch of windows blew out and we needed to replace them, insurance might cover that. If the building's a little tall, but if a tree fell down on one of the low rise or something and fell through the roof and caused damage to the exterior of the building, that would be an insurance claim. There is no insurance for the building's insurances, and I don't think there's any insurance products out there that insure a homeowner or building or even a commercial building from lack of maintenance or overdue maintenance or just regular maintenance. Even if it's not overdue, you don't get insurance for that. That's just a cost of ownership. Does that make sense?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right.
All right. Next question is, what will happen if less than the total of the $44 million is eventually, I think it says collected, but I think it means spent. So part of the answer is we don't know yet because we don't know how much money there is. There may be some pieces that we've deferred that, for example, the Edwin Land Plaza, we could do some repairs there while it's torn up. But the board has simply not made a determination of that. Some of it could be returned. Some of it could be put into the capital fund in the very way that you're saying, so that we can cover a later expense. This is, it's conceivable there could be $1 million left over or something, or $2 million. We don't know, but it's not a problem we have yet. So we will have to decide when we have that problem.
Could that question actually be, what if we don't?
Oh, it says collected, and maybe that's
Yeah.
a different question. Okay, no, then I guess I misinterpreted it. So maybe you should speak to that, Jason. What happens if we don't get all the money from the owners?
What I can say is that generally, while this is an extraordinary expense and a large, complicated, expensive project, in general, the fees that are needed to fund this project are condo fees and are subject to collections laws in the state of Massachusetts, very common and nationwide. Condo fees are required to be paid. And so I think, I'm not sure, I think some people may need longer than others, but I guess the goal is that all the money eventually will be available or collected.
Anyone with a genuine hardship should speak up, because we're going to do everything we can to help. There are limits to what we can do, but we'll do whatever we can.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there'll be more discussion about costs and terms and.
Okay, next question is, will anything on the outside look different when the work is done? Yeah, it's going to look better, but maybe one of you guys would like to speak to the details of that.
The overall direction that we've received from day one for the board, that is, they want it to look similar to what you have now, albeit that the paint on the windows won't be faded and things like that. But the intent is to keep it as River Court has been.
If you especially on the Edwin Land side, if you look carefully, you'll see there's a lot of flaking paint off the metal work there, the railings and so on. All that stuff's going to look like new. That's all going to be cleaned up and repainted. And the same thing's true for a lot of the window frames. Not only they're faded, there's some flakiness. If you walk around the building, you'll see there are a lot of places where there's been, I'll call it emergency caulking done, things to deal with particular leaks. It really looks terrible if you're close to the ground and look at that stuff. It's a haphazard thing. All of those windows are going to be taken out, cleaned up, resealed properly. So the appearance of the building will be as near as like new as it's possible to make it. I think we'll have a much slicker looking building from the street. Any other comments about that?
Yeah, everything will be newer looking, most everything, and or cleaned up and uniform in appearance. I think some of the things, I'm hoping that when they have to patch or repair cast concrete, for example, or replace mortar between joints of brick and sections or pieces of granite, that they match the color and the tones. I see over the years, I've seen a lot of masonry work where that wasn't taken into account, and then you have whole sections of buildings with different color mortar and everything. And I know there's a professional process to make sure that you are matching. It's, you see it a lot on restorations of historical buildings. There's a method to making sure that the new mortar matches, and that you're matching patches into cast concrete and such, right?
Yes, we will absolutely go through a process with BES to color match mortar to make sure that you don't, it's a seamless transition from new to old.
Yeah, we've already determined from past repairs that there is a brick that's commercially available now, that's the perfect match for the bricks that we had that are 30 years old.
Yeah, Jason, we started that process early in the project, all the color matching of the materials from the windows to the mortar to the bricks. So Sebastian's right. That is it is not just hardware store materials. They're specifically matched to the
That's
to
correct.
respect the building.
That's correct. And I will also supplement that by saying that the masons that we have gone out to bid for this project are, masonry restoration experts in the field. It's not like these are just masons who do do ground up buildings all the time. This is something that they are specialists in, restoring precast concrete, restoring masonry, mortar joints, repointing. This is definitely not a new construction type of process. So we've gone out to the appropriate trades that will be able to match the existing as best, for a seamless view.
Okay, next question is, what will be the next step? Will the owners vote, or whether the project will go ahead, or what the board will decide? The board has the responsibility and authority to maintain the building. And yes, the board needs to make this decision. There won't be an additional vote. Anything else to say about that, Jason? Maybe not. Okay.
No, I mean, I think I've said it before. This is a function of the board as elected representatives in any condo. It's not specific to River Court. If owners were being asked to add an amenity, like if somebody petitioned to add a swimming pool to the roof deck on top of the building, or something that would be an improvement to the building, which would require a vote of ownership, but maintaining what's there, replacing the same components, windows for windows and such, that's repair and maintenance, and that's a board obligation. It's a form of representative government in a way, and so this is what the board has a fiduciary responsibility to do. This sort of thing, as painful as it may be in this case.
Here's a good question. Have you looked into the sustainability of the new windows in future years, such as availability of hardware? Maybe that's
So I'll jump on that.
Okay.
One of the intents is on the hardware is to buy a certain percentage of attic stock, such that if they need to be replaced, that we have some on site that we can replace the hardware as necessary. We have not landed on what that percentage needs to be at this point, but
Also, I imagine down the road, some, making sure that the manufacturer is keeping in touch with the manufacturer to make sure that parts are still available, and budgeting for a certain allotment of parts, so that we have them on hand, even if in I don't know, 30 years the model lines being phased out or something. I don't know. I don't know if
Yeah,
the
well, we've
Kennedy
been
guys can
doing this in
collaborate
other areas. We're now maintaining a stock of parts for the Wayland units with our new contractors, so that they don't have to be ordered. If you need a damper motor or something, they're likely to have one. That hasn't been the case historically. So this is a maintenance function. It's an important one, and it's something that we intend to attend to. Let's see. How much time do you expect the work in a specific unit to take, from window removal to window installed? I think that's for you guys, Stan.
That's going to vary based on the quantity of windows, the size of the windows. So we are, it could be several days per unit. But again, we'll know better once we get into that and begin the operation in earnest. And I think it's just very important point that I'd like to make is that at no such time will we ever be leaving a unit where it is in any sort of an unsafe condition. So both our presence there and when we are not there, all of these units will be made safe and weather tight, even on an interim basis.
Okay, but we're not talking a month of time.
No,
for a unit. We're
no.
talking about days,
We're
right?
talking days. But again, Dick, that will vary. Some of the units where we have the double glass, some of them are easy, get in and get out. Others are definitely more involved. At the higher level, at the penthouse levels where we have the more complicated glazing assemblies, those are going to take a little bit longer.
Okay, yeah, and for example, our unit has 10 windows, but they're all small ones. We don't have the huge picture windows. But because there are a lot of them, I presume it's going to take more time than that it might take a week to do 10 windows. We just don't know. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And we're the crew sizes for the window replacement are also going to be refined. So what is the best size to be efficient about the job?
So the question is, how many crews would you have operating at the same time, basically, right?
Yes, and it's right now it's been multiple. So we're working through that.
Okay.
I can have a follow-up question to that. Some units have windows on different exposures that look like they're going to be in different phases. Some of the central tower units that have windows that facing the river, and then they also have windows in the bedrooms that face First Street.
Yeah.
Is it the case that they'll have 2 visits essentially 9 months apart?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we're
Go ahead, Seb.
Yeah, we're trying to develop the phasing plan so that to limit the number of times we're in a unit. But as you mentioned, some units have units that are part of 2 different phases, and they will have each phase will be about roughly about a week. But yes, it may be that we have to come back 9 months later or to do the other side of the building.
And that's simply because you can't do it without the scaffolding, and the scaffolding isn't everywhere all the time, right? So-
Correct. Yes.
Otherwise, it would be more expensive. So where this is practical, you can do it, but if it's not practical, it's the reason why it's not happening in a given unit is because
Right. We redeveloped our phasing plan in order to be the most efficient, trying to find that sweet spot of number of crews, keeping them efficient throughout the day, the work day. And because if we were to just attack the entire building at once, it's impossible to control an army of workers to do it all at once. And we want to make sure that we're doing it correctly, giving people the adequate time to prepare for us, and being efficient as we go, and maintaining a proper quality control, quality assurance program throughout the process. So,
Okay. The existing economical windows, in quotes, lasted at least 25 plus years from the building construction to 2014. Is it really necessary to have higher quality new windows than that also last 25 to 30 years?
So the biggest driver on this is really the newer code requirements and how the windows have to withstand wind pressures at higher elevations that weren't in place when the building was first built. So that is driving the cost of the windows. That being said, the selected window was certainly not the most expensive window. So we've tried to be as thorough as we could to find the right windows for this situation and make sure that they're compliant with code. Windows and doors.
All right,
Also, a lot of windows, it's not like, oh, they're out of date. I mean, windows have been rotting and leaking for years in this building. I don't know when the first window started to leak, but it was probably premature, especially the sliders.
Okay, so the next question is similar. It's about multiple faces on the units with windows on 3 of the facade sides. What is the expected duration of apartment disruption for each facade side? What I'd suggest is that you take a look at the logistics plan that's on the website. The dates aren't in there because the dates aren't set yet, but the durations for which facades are being done in what order is there, and you get a sense of that. Okay, it seems the next one is, it seems the original developer used inferior materials, windows, sealant, etc. The developer continues to build new product in Boston. Has anyone approached the original developer to share in this cost, as his credibility is at stake? I don't know what to do with that.
I'll let Warren.
Go ahead, Warren.
I'm not. original developer's responsibility ended many, many years ago.
And they went bankrupt at the time, right? So whatever
Yeah.
liability they had was settled then, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. It's too bad. It was, you know, we inherited some problems from them.
And also, but some of it is also that some of this stuff is just aged legitimately too. Some of the sealants, you know, they were maybe they were some of the best that were available at the time, but they've lasted only so long. They've you know, probably only had a 20-year lifespan, and it's been over 20 years. So so that's part of it too. It's not all, you know, flaws or methods and practices and stuff.
We still have quite a few questions. We clearly won't get through all of them, and we'll. I'm just say that now because we promised we'd stop at 7:30.
Well, we missed one, I think, from Beth. Look, it's a good question.
Tried to speak to that.
It's regarding units with windows on 3 facades. You know,
There's some that are at corners, and those can be done at the corner windows can be done at the same time as the main face. I think it's there's some details there. We can answer specific questions about that if you'd like to send them to us.
Yeah, and a logistic plan phasing diagram that we just referred to, which is apparently on the website, would kind of shows you what would be included in a given phase. So it might help answer the question too.
Next question is, can we install materials that last much longer, like 100 or more years? Brick may not last that for a long time.
So I'll give an example to this, and it's really a couple of things. The mansard roofs are copper, and copper roofs typically have 100-year lifespan. The problem is that it's the substrate underneath them that has failed and or is leaking. So it's not the roof material itself as much as it's the material underneath.
So if we do that right and put up a proper copper roof, it should last 100 years.
Should last 100 years. So now the brick isn't necessarily the issue. It's been the water that's been getting in behind the brick that has caused some of the, or many of the issues. We're trying to deal with the water infiltration issue, which leads to a bunch of these problems.
Okay, we have a question about the Whalen units. When will the HVAC Whalen units be replaced, and will that be paid for from the reserves built into the condo fees?
That's
Our current plan is to maintain the units. We were told that they're maintainable. We've been servicing them. They're not great, but they are maintainable for the foreseeable future, I think.
So yeah, I mean, part of the issue is that we're learning that they weren't properly maintained consistently for a long time, and we're just now sort of getting our heads around that. And at some point, they will not be serviceable anymore, and so we do need to plan ahead for that eventuality and discuss what kind of modifications that we can make to our system that make it more user-friendly or less less binary, heat on, cooling on, off, there's, I've had some very preliminary discussions with our new mechanical contractor about some of the issues that we're having, and it's something that we're working on. And if we can improve the system affordably and practically, then that certainly should be a goal. But this is sort of something that's a little bit down the road. We had to prioritize, but that's definitely one of the systems in the building that that needs updating.
Here's a question for Warren. Does the GMP apply to only the 39.9 million that Lee Kennedy is responsible for, or the full 44.5 million? How do we ensure that there won't be an overrun in the soft costs?
So the GMP applies only to the Lee Kennedy construction numbers, the numbers that they put forward. The soft costs, the board has some contingency monies, a little bit of contingency monies in there, but most of the costs, soft costs are already baked in. They're already signed. There's no additional.
Pre-construction stuff mostly too, right?
Pre-construction stuff is gone. The CSL contract, BES is all signed up. So there shouldn't be any other additional soft costs.
Okay, there's a comment here. Some of the personal insurance policies might actually cover for a one-time assessment. That's something you have to check with your insurance company. I will say, everybody is entitled to a tax rebate for the windows. You have to do that yourself, but you'll have the documentation from Lee Kennedy when your windows are installed, and the pricing for the windows. And because they're high energy conserving windows, low E windows, you will be eligible for a tax rebate. So everybody's entitled to that. So that's part of that's a small grace there. All right. Has the Lee Kennedy construction contract been signed? No, it hasn't. What happens if the building can't collect the needed $43 million? I think we've already addressed that. How much of the $45 million is going to Barcan? I can answer that question. There is an allocation in the budget of $150,000 for additional service from Barcan. This is involved in the additional billing and handling of all the paperwork for the project. It's the individual bills that come through Lee Kennedy and CSL. It's the payments from owners that's dealing with the bank stuff. We don't know how much of that we'll spend, but we've put that as an allocation for Barcan. Somebody's asking, why aren't we able to see the questions that are coming in? I'm sorry, that's the way the thing is set up. They're just coming to us. What is the cost of storing materials off-site to labor not being able to keep pace with the materials arrival? Can we get a specific idea, since we were told it would be more cost effective to do all the work at once? Maybe you can speak to that, Dan. You understand the question? No.
I'm not sure that we have that
Yeah.
actual storage cost broken out. We can certainly try to dig it out. It's not as much a function. The storage is a critical issue no matter what. And we don't want to keep them in storage any longer than we have to.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't have
speak to
place
that a
on
little bit.
site for that. Yeah, go ahead, Sebastian.
So it's certainly most cost effective to fabricate all the windows at once, because they're being these are being custom made for this specific job, with the color and sizing. So for the manufacturer to make them all at once is a cost savings. There is obviously where we are in Kendall Square here, we can't physically store all the materials on site at any given time, so we have to naturally keep them off site. And then when we keep on speaking to doing the job most cost effective at doing it all at once, what we're speaking about is the current phasing plan that we have, where it's a continuous process where we work our way around the building and not do it over many years and phasing here and there. So the way that we have it currently phased out is the quote unquote all at once approach that we keep discussing, a continuous process throughout the building.
Yeah, also, my understanding is that part of the problem with the windows is getting them to come out of storage in the right order, that you need enough space to get them organized so that you have the windows
Right.
you need when you do
Exactly,
it.
because it's gonna be we're gonna be producing them, working with the fabricator to produce them by phase, but also by type. So they're gonna be, sending all of the, same types together, because that's the most cost effective way to produce them. So, but yes, you do need space to do that. And we're working with a window installer that has a lot of space on their own shop. So it's not that we're actually paying supplemental costs to store them elsewhere where avoidable. We're sorting them at their shop and then shipping them to the site.
Okay, this question is, it says, I'd like to see the 3 bids, and if we have any other contract bids other than the proposed Lee Kennedy, are those bids available to view, and other construction group bids other than Lee Kennedy? The board as Warren had said, interviewed the people who responded to our request for proposal and made the choice of Lee Kennedy. So that's a done deal. I don't know whether we're at liberty to offer the other proposals. What's the story on that, Warren?
So the story is that, and I agree with it, Lee Kennedy has all the bids for all the trades. And they will be made available, but they're not going to be made available until contracts are signed. The problem is if you make it available in this electronic age, it can be then put out on the internet and things like that, and that is actually be a negative to River Court. If you're wanting to rebid, I'm not sure what that would get you.
Okay. Question is, was the River Court condominium exterior building envelope study, the 2020 architectural engineering study of the condition of the building, made available to residents at the time? Was it available on Building Link? Yes, I believe it was. I'm not sure exactly when it went up, but it has been there for some time. This was the basis of our presentation we made as well. Is that right, Jason?
Yeah,
Also, the 2014 thing has been up forever. As long as I've been in the building, the 2014 thing has been on study has been on Building Link. We're trying to be, there's a lot of materials, and if there's something you don't see, send a message through the website, and we'll try to put it up. But Building Link is a little clunky, and the material there is not very well organized. We're trying to organize it better on restore10rogers.com. This one says, we use the First Street courtyard a lot. Will it be completely blocked off for the whole process? Can we access the court? Can access to the courtyard be allowed as much as possible? Who is that, Dan?
So
Yeah, Dick, we'll work through that to maintain safe passable egress. To keep it open, keep as much open as we can.
That's great. It
Is
also
it-
depends on which part of the building you're working on at a particular time,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
Correct.
right, yeah, the phasing plan speaks to that a little bit.
Yes.
Will Lee Kennedy be using union workers?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone want to elaborate on that, Warren? I know this question's come up a lot.
So there are, when we're looking at the window installers, the roofers, and the masons, there are none of those entities that are large enough to handle a project of this size, both physical and dollars, in Eastern Massachusetts. And even if we were to go to non-union, companies like Lee Kennedy and others are signatory to the unions, and therefore we'd have to get a different construction manager, and the same problem exists. There aren't any non-signatory contractors that are large enough to handle this project and take it all non-union. Forget about influences of the unions themselves. They're not there.
Okay, well, it's after 7:30, and we said we'd just take an hour and a half. There are still a great many questions, and we will go through them and answer those we can through the website, and those that remain, we will certainly answer next week with the Tuesday session. So I want to thank the panelists for being here, for all the work that you've done, and thank everybody who's joined us. This session has been recorded and will be made available through restore10rogers.com. So have a good evening. Thank you for being with us.